Right after all of the shenanigans in Washington, we were significantly below fair value. We've narrowed up just a little bit. We are about 36 below fair value in terms of Dow futures. At one point, we were about 90 below fair value. NASDAQ futures are only slightly lower, about 4 below fair value at this early morning hour, and S&P 500 futures are off about 5. Joining us now is Meredith Shiner, reporter at Roll Call, and Zane Brown is still with me on set. Meredith, a very good morning to you, a very good evening, depending on your perspective. I know you were out late last night sourcing. What can you give us in terms of the latest on the debt talks?
Well, I think that's a very good question because not many people know what's going on, because earlier yesterday it seemed clear that John Boehner would have the votes to pass his package through the House of Representatives, and as the day ticked on, they kept having to push the vote back because those last 2 or 3 votes were really daunting for him. He spent all day going in and out of meetings with individual members, particularly conservatives, who are very wary to support this plan, and there's no clear path. Meanwhile, the Senate has been waiting for the House to act, either to pass or fail, before Harry Reid tries to move on his alternative. So right now it's a little bit of chaos, which, given that there's a Treasury default deadline of Tuesday, is pretty scary for some people, I'd say, and particularly the markets, where you've seen the Dow, for example, open down for 2 to 3 consecutive days.
4 days, actually, yeah.
Well, deadline aside, Meredith, it's kind of surprising that the criteria for a downgrade seem to be ignored by congressmen. We don't seem to find them addressing the magnitude and the content that rating agencies are saying are required for them to avoid downgrading. Why do you think that that's the case? Why do you think they seem to be just ignoring what the rating agencies are saying they will do if there's not an adequate package?
I feel like it's probably a misnomer to lump all the lawmakers together. I think that leaders are very aware that the ratings agencies have a huge impact on what the American economy is. I think you see the White House recognizing that. I think you even see Speaker John Boehner recognizing that. But if you look at his caucus, you have a conference that's comprised of many new members who ran against government spending. And so one of the biggest sticking points right now between Senate Democrats and House Republicans is the length of the debt ceiling extension. One of John Boehner's demands was that the debt ceiling was lifted with an amount of commensurate in cuts. And so the Senate Democrats have created a plan that would go through the next election. Republicans have charged that this is political, but Democrats point to the S&P ratings that they'd say they don't want to see this sort of fight again, because if you have this impasse a few days out now, you know, are you going to replay this again, and are you going to create more market uncertainty? And so I think that there's just a lot of questions surrounding what Congress is able to do, if they're able to overcome gridlock, and I think that you are seeing that in how the ratings agencies are reacting.
Meredith, it's Anna in London. Do you think that there is a belief or an understanding amongst lawmakers on Capitol Hill about what the implications will be if we get to some kind of, if we get to Tuesday, if that is the real date and the real deadline, and all of a sudden the US government is not able to raise more money in the markets? And what would that mean for payments of Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and the big cuts that we might have to see coming through as a result in order to avoid any kind of default on debt? Do you think there is an understanding? Do you hear lawmakers talk about that kind of issue?
Look, I think that there are 2 answers to your question. One, I think that lawmakers really understand that this is a serious issue, that there are serious consequences. What's interesting is that you haven't seen real dramatic flux in the market, and so it's fueling this idea that, oh, maybe the market isn't going to react as strongly as we thought it was, because I think people on Wall Street can't imagine that Congress wouldn't be able to get this done, and so it's become this weird, vicious cycle. Secondly, I think that you're going to see more pressure on the Treasury to announce their plans for which payments will be made first, whether or not we'll pay interest on our bonds, whether Social Security payments will be made, whether the military will be paid, particularly if you don't see a bill pass through Congress today, whether it's John Boehner's bill in the House or whether Harry Reid starts moving on his legislation. I think that Timothy Geithner is going to have to start answering questions that he's been dodging for quite some time, which is, well, what's the plan for who to make payments to and when?
Yeah, but isn't it also a party, and you rightly note that it's a misnomer to lump all politicians together, but we're not just dealing with the Democrats and Republicans here, Meredith. As you know, we're dealing with what I see as like 5 parties: the progressive left, the Keynesian left, the centrist Democrats, the Boehner Republicans, the Tea Party Republicans. Have you ever seen, of course you were at Politico before you were at Roll Call, have you ever seen it this fragmented before, even within party ranks?
Well, even in my time at Politico, I've only been covering Capitol Hill for 2 years, so I don't know that my context goes that deep. But I think that this is a different time. I think that the kind of rhetoric you see from these members, whether they're conservative or progressive, the kind of pressures on the president, on the speaker, on the majority leader, you came from one of the most productive Congresses in the past, 50 years, to now you have a divided government that has been really stalemated, and this is the most important thing they'll probably do before the next election, and they're struggling to do it. And it's difficult because you have a conference meeting with John Boehner where you have the chairman of the Conservative Study Committee actively whipping against him. You have emails disclosed from chief of staff basically saying we have to kill this deal. We have to make sure that this doesn't go anywhere. And so it's this balancing act that all these lawmakers have to deal with. Meanwhile, they know the actual market realities of what they're doing. And so I think that there's just a lot of pressure, and I think that it's difficult.
I'm not sure. I think that there are some other options that we can get to from Fed and Treasury in another segment. Meredith, we appreciate your perspective. Get some sleep, my friend, reporter at Roll Call, joining us live out of Washington. Anna.